Welcome to Biodesign Now, a podcast exploring the intersection of design, art, biology, and technology. I'm Kirsten Tingle, an artist and biodesigner, and this is my co-host Akir Hall, a biodesigner. And we are joined today by Paul Treichl, who is going to be talking us through a variety of exciting things from soil health to social currency to alternative teaching pedagogies and how to make an education for the future.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. So let's jump right into our quick fire questions. So we think all biodesigners will like these. So the first one is, what is the best organism that you have collaborated with so far?
That's a good question. I have thought about it, but I can't. There's no bad one really. Every organism is ever so slightly different, but there's no bad one really. I think it's mostly the things with working with organisms that annoy you are mostly your own fault, where you mishandle the organism or the environment that it's supposed to grow in. I'm just gonna say every organism so far.
That's really nice.
These are either going to be so boring or very wholesome.
I think it's very wholesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask this one anyway, even though you've given the answer. What is the worst organism that you've collaborated with? Any of them annoyed you? I'm trying to pull it out.
Any enemies?
Yeah, no, the thing is, I feel like the obvious answer to that one would be humans. I feel like that would be the obvious answer. But no, I'm just gonna stay wholesome.
We try it. That's very nice. Okay.
I can be a hater, but
no, we can be wholesome as well. So the next one is, what is inspiring you in nature right now?
That's vague. I'm gonna give you a vague answer.
Fair.
Consciousness. So I've been reading up a lot on there's a lot of books, funnily enough, that came out in the past few years about consciousness. So ways of being, that touches quite a bit on that. And then the octopus book that's called Other Minds, I think.
Yeah.
Which goes all about consciousness. And then Biocentrism by Robert Lanza, that also talks a lot more philosophical and how consciousness is at the center of reality and all that kind of stuff. And the kind of impact of consciousness of different living organisms on their environment, our environment, how we interact with them, that kind of that is just currently super, super fascinating to me. And it kind of blends a bit into how do we make biodesign object systems, whatever, accessible to general public, to people who not have this hyper focus on biodesign and everything related to it, but general public who doesn't necessarily care that much. Yeah, I think consciousness is currently the super fascinating thing for me.
Very nice.
Very cool.
So, biggest biodesign pet peeve?
I kind of teased this earlier, I think. I think we should all just stop and think before we do certain biodesign things. I think we do too much biodesign where it's not needed. It feels like a very trendy thing right now, and I feel like there's this pressure of, in every industry, in every field, in every niche, to do something with biodesign in there, even if it's wasting so much more resources than the original thing that it's supposed to be replacing. And it's just, yeah, I don't like taking inspiration from nature in terms of decentralized manufacturing and small scales and all these kind of things, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's biodesign, but if you just take systems and ideas out of it, but I think just like we don't have to do biodesign in everything. I think we can just like stop and think about materiality and usage and interaction and behavior first, and then think, okay, does it make sense in the current time, in the current setting, in wherever the intervention would be, to completely reinvent a specific material? Because we've got plenty of materials, let's be honest. Like there's enough materials. It's about how we use them. It's like with my background in architecture, like concrete per se is not bad. Like obviously it like has a lot of problems, but one of the main problems with concrete is how it's being used, because it's relatively cheap, it's easy to use, and subsequently it's just getting overused. And yeah, I think just like, especially when we come to materiality, like stopping and thinking to be like, is there already a material out there that we can like adapt or like use for this purpose, instead of like completely reinventing something? I think as a
so not like overcomplicating the issue.
Yeah. There's like this over-engineering thing when it's like it can be simple. Like you don't have to overdo it. Like you don't have to make everything so like individualistic and like thriving for like your standout thing that you know. Like you can relax a bit. Like you don't have to overdo it.
Is this kind of a little bit of the tension between, say, like green growth versus degrowth?
Yeah, I think so. It's this. Yeah, I think pretty much it. This kind of like we see it in like the biodesign industry that like is growing now with more and more venture capital money. Yeah. That is trend. It's a fad. It's like it's a means to profit rather than what it actually should be, how it started out, or like at least in my opinion is at the foundation of it. So yeah, I think like we need to just rethink also like who are we working for, what are we working for, what kind of future, I guess.
I think this is a good place to lead on to what is biodesign to you? How would you define it?
I think at the basis of it, it's more of like a new way of behaving and collaborating, more than anything else at its core. Because if we, like with biodesign, obviously, like you've got biology, you've got design, at the core of it should be, or like is, at least in like in a very like optimistic view, this very degrowth, like decentralized, just very anti-capitalistic, and just focusing on nature, on community, on like a co-living, and that's kind of like at the core of it. And then you add on to, and you also do this while working with microbes, with plants, with whatever. I think that was also one of the things why I have like in my different bios, I work with living organisms, because like quite a bit of the work I do is with microbes and that kind of stuff. But quite a bit of work, and what I focus on as well, is like the human, is the interaction that we have with other organisms, other conscious beings. And I think that's like the interesting part about this. Like it's like a different change of behavior in design. But,
so like biodesign as a set of values for how we structure our lives and how those guide us to interact with the world, be it in design or, just our living in general, kind of like that.
Or a sort of solar punk localism.
Yeah, I think a good mix of...
Very nice.
I think good mix of that, both. I think you said it a lot better than I just like mumbled. I think it's more of like a vision, yeah, I think it's more of a vision, and a lot of the big projects we currently see out of space that are like well known, I feel are not currently in that ethos, because obviously they are catering to a sort of very capitalistic growth kind of industry that obviously pick out quite often projects that are valuable for industry. But I think at the core of it, and if like there are plenty of projects out there like that actually value this kind of interaction, and like trying to create a more like equitable place.
Like really challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
And help us like restructure the way we live.
Yeah.
So going right back, what was your relationship with nature growing up as a young child?
So I'm from Austria, and like this little part between Germany and Italy, and nature was kind of always around. Like this, like my town is the second biggest town there, and we have like now 20,000 inhabitants. It used to be 18, I think. And literally, like next to my parents' house was like a field with flowers and stuff, and you could like eat the flowers and stuff. So, and you have the mountains and all that, so it's super, super accessible, and you don't really think about like that it's like not a natural thing. Like my uncle like had cows and pigs and all that, and fields and stuff, so it was like always around you, really. There wasn't really even in the city center, it 2 minutes and then you're either by like the forest or you're in the mountains. It's not really big, so it was very much a like 100% surrounding experience. And then we had like we had pears and apples, I think, in the garden, which absolutely horrible apples. They were plenty, but they were absolutely horrible.
Abundance is not always your friend.
No, it's absolutely not. It's I think we only had them for like 2 or 3 years until we realized these apples are absolute garbage. But we had walnuts and plums, and my mum used to make a lot of like jam with the plums and like has the walnuts and stuff. So there was like this, even more this connection between like plants and like food and all that kind of things. So it's like it was great. Like I couldn't really imagine like not having grown up in like a massive city where I don't really have access to all of that. I think it would be very, very different.
It really does sound great, except for the apples.
Yeah.
Other than that,
the neighbors had good apples, and like the branches was going over our like property line. So
the true forbidden fruit.
Yeah, it truly is.
So you're having this somewhat idyllic, in some ways, childhood in Austria, and then can you tell us a bit about where you went after Austria? So you left to study in the UK.
Yes. So,
architecture?
Well, so when I finished school, still in Austria, in Austria we still have like mandatory military service. So either that, or you do like what's the word? Like EMT so it's either 6 months military or 9 months EMT, or working in an elderly care home, or these kind of things. And I did not really like military, so I was instantly, I'm going to do the 9 months in an elderly care home. And I did that, and that was kind of like my preparedness to be like, okay, where do I study? What do I study? I didn't even know what I wanted to study. So I like looked at different things and thought architecture could be interesting. But because I was so unprepared for all of this, that I was just like, okay, I'm just going to apply for this, see if I get in. If I like it, cool. And if I don't, I can still switch. Because in Austria, like you can study for free basically until I think if it takes you longer than 7 or 8 years to do your bachelor's, then you have to pay like 400 quid a semester or something. But other than that, it's
Sounds
completely
really
free.
nice.
Yeah, so there wasn't really that much pressure that it is here, whereas like studying something is immediately connected to quite a bit of money. So it didn't really, I went in and was like, okay, architecture, that's cool. And that was in Austria still, in Innsbruck. And then I, luckily for me, really enjoyed it. And then after my bachelor's, I was in Brussels for a bit to work. And then I did a 1-year master's in Edinburgh, which was unfortunately cut short a bit because of COVID. And then I was in Vienna for a bit. And then I kind of like found biodesign and thought, I think that's worth it for me to like kind of go back to studying, and good excuse to come to London. So
yeah. What was your master's in Edinburgh in?
it was called Advanced Sustainable Design, and it was quite interesting because a lot of it was like almost like an intro from architecture towards biodesign, where it was more about systems. It was more about like, also in terms of like what I mentioned before, but it was like the don't over engineer it. I remember one of the sessions was on like building efficiency, and how, depending on how your building is positioned, you might not need triple glazing all around. Like you can save money and energy on doing double glazing on certain windows. So like that was kind of like a good preparedness of thinking in systems and connectiveness and understanding, okay, it doesn't have like, I can adapt two different scenarios in the same kind of like fabric.
Was there anything that you studied in your bachelor's that kind of pushed you towards sustainable design? Did it feature like majorly when you were studying, or was it something that you were thinking about on your own, or something your tutors were interested in, or?
Ish. Back then it didn't really play. I say back then as if it was the 80s. But like back then, it wasn't really that major. Like, yeah, it wasn't really featured that much. I was super lucky because the inventor of the passive house, or like founder, or whatever you want to call it, he was still doing lectures, and we were one of like the last few years that he did. And I remember he was coming in, and the first things he said was, I looked at your curriculum, you don't know enough, you're not learning enough about like sustainability and like certain building practices that you like, as you should know. After this session, I'm doing another session in like the next room. If you want to join me, like it's not compulsory or anything, but like if you want to join me, join me. And then it was quite sad because sometimes it was just 3 of us, including him.
Really?
But it was super valuable, and like that kind of was one of the reasons why then was like I want to do, or like go into like the more sustainable kind of like fields after it, because it was super fascinating. And yeah, just like learning all of these things from somebody who just like pushed off this movement really, like in architecture, with like passive house and all that. So yeah.
What is the passive house? Oh.
Heat that goes in stays in, heat that goes out stays out. So like it's like a whole system and a whole cycle that kind of heats itself in winter and cools itself in summer, and like all of these different, like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with like passive cooling through like concrete beams and like all these kind of things that play into that. And it's like very defined by like a very closed off building fabric, if I remember that 100% correctly, but probably just rambling on.
So would that be a bit like say, instead of trying to go, like, I feel like there's different routes to trying to make something really sustainable, and one might be like, I'm going to go off grid and like have solar panels and a tiny wind turbine and a water filter, etc. And the other sustainability route might be, I will make this building so correctly and with these new technologies so that it just uses no or very little power inputs.
It's like very efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I kind of changed my mind a bit because I always was like, yeah, passive house is really, really great and stuff. But I've kind of changed my mind a bit in terms of like what is truly sustainable.
What is truly sustainable?
Yes, I can just lose in that answer.
We want to know now.
I mean, I feel like it's more of like a complete change on how we like build, and obviously the way we build is very much like anti animals, organisms, and also anti-human to some degree. Like if you need like ventilators and like air fresheners and all that kind of stuff for your home to be hospitable, I don't know how good that is.
Yeah. You're looking for something more radical.
Yeah, completely changing. But also like the whole self-sufficiency thing is cool and all. But funny enough, in Edinburgh, we had this one course where we got a city, and that city had like 1,000 inhabitants or something like that. And they were like, okay, imagine 600 people move there. You have to choose in the beginning how self-sufficient this town is, and then you have to plan everything around it accordingly. And like one of the big findings was that like having your own energy production and all that is cool and great, but in a if you connect that to the national grid, and obviously you need to like decarbonize and all that, but like if you connect it to national grid and share that energy, because some might have surplus somewhere that they can't really use, and then you have surplus that you can't really use. And if you share all that, that is a lot more like sustainable, because you don't need expensive and like quite, I think they've gotten better since then, but quite expensive and like not really that good storages.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, this kind of like communal, like, yeah, self-sufficient, but also communal. It's kind of like sharing.
Sort of like interdependent community beats self-sufficient homestead off the grid.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Do you think there is a tension between, like what we were just discussing in terms of like an idyllic kind of off-grid solar punk lifestyle that is very disconnected but seemingly perfect, versus what seems like a compromise ideologically, where you might be connected to the wider system that needs improvements and is imperfect, but actually if you run the numbers, it might actually be more sustainable. Like in the way that if you live in a dense city and in a flat, you might be saving more energy on heating and producing less emissions because the heating is shared between everyone that lives in that flat, versus like a home in the country, for example. Like that kind of tension.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the thing as well. And I feel like, especially when we talk about like the kind of home in the middle of nowhere that is completely self-sufficient, whereas like this kind of interconnected group that is then again connected to others. Yeah, I think that's the interesting part, because like with sustainability also there's like the community side of things as well, like the what's economic sustainability, then there's
like social,
that was the word.
Yeah.
Glad to know I forgot the word social. So with social sustainability, obviously like the community is an incredibly valuable part of this, and it also is like fostering of community and creating a system in which people are needed and feel like they are participating in something. That is incredibly valuable. And also like sharing infrastructure and sharing like your knowledge is like already saving, like it's really sustainable in its core, really, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that we've had this real gutting of social infrastructure. And not that biodesign has to do everything, but I think that like trying to build in ways of rebuilding this social infrastructure into biodesign practices, especially biodesign practices that reconnect people with nature or the environment, is a really nice way to try and fix a lot of problems at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the interesting part about all of this is when we talk about like biodesign and like biodesign objects and processes and like how they are distributed around the world and who's participating in them and all that, we need to kind of think about it as like a behavioral change. And when we talk about behavioral change, like, I mean, we already see this trend where people, or at least some, go from like single-use cups to reuse cups. So that's a behavioral change. And then obviously the more sustainable you make the cup, the better, and all that kind of stuff. But the kind of thing with this is that if I have a reusable cup, I then have to go home and wash it. So I'm doing maintenance work on that. And especially with biodesign, where we deal with a living organism that you can't just put it there and then it does its thing, and you don't have to interact with it in some way. Like obviously, like it will do its own thing, but like if you wanted to use it in a specific way, you have to maintain it. And I feel like, especially like a lot of social infrastructure was very much dependent on maintenance, both of like physical infrastructure, but also like hidden infrastructures in our social lives. So I definitely think biodesign can like impact that very much in terms of like getting a change in behaviors. I think I was listening to an economics podcast about maintenance, and I think one of the things they said was a university in the US, and about 80% of students there in engineering will be doing maintenance.
Oh.
Or it was like a general US-wide study. I can't remember exactly, but it was like 80% or something are doing maintenance work. So that kind of hidden work that kind of gets forgotten a bit, which is so valuable. And because we stopped doing maintenance because it's not profitable, really. Maintenance costs more money. So like especially with the bridge, like it's easier to build cheaper to build a new bridge than it is to repair one. But that's not really it's not really the best thing to do. So I think it's also the same with biodesign. It's all about maintenance and like making things last longer or like be better by maintaining for them and caring for them. I think a lot of the, like going back to like the very first questions of what is biodesign, for me, there's a lot of ethic in there, like a lot of ethics of care on, with other organisms and like conscious beings around you.
Yeah, I think this really interesting point that you're making about biodesign philosophy and behavioral change, I think is so embedded in the materiality of biodesign. Like for example, mud bricks, right? So those mosques in Mali that are all built with local resources and local mud. Every year it requires the entire community to maintain the building and rebuild it to a certain extent. And these are structures that have lasted for a very long time, but are embedded in the lives of everybody that uses the building, and is active in using the space spiritually, but literally in terms of the building materials themselves. They're so like integrated into that process and involved. And I think that's a really interesting thing about biomateriality as well, like maintenance, particularly with ancient materials and ancient building materials in the built environment, kind of upkeep that we've kind of lost or don't recognize as being as valuable, even when it is like, always happening and always there.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like, it's not only good for like materiality and like our like physical infrastructure, but I assume in Mali, they don't just like all go there and in like quietness maintain this and then they all leave again and never see each other again. So like there is such a big social infrastructure behind this, like building social capital and all of these kind of things, that that's so intrinsically connected to biodesign, and I feel like it's quite often it's getting kind of a bit lost in that. I think one of the really, really good project on that is the project by Paola Camina, where she was working hand in hand with like these weavers.
It's such a good project.
It's
so
brilliant.
good.
Yeah.
But yeah, like these kind of like I think especially like biodesign artifacts have a like incredible impact, or can have an incredible impact if done right, on social capital, and like the creation of social capital and the maintenance of social capital, amongst other things. But yeah.
Yeah, one thing that's sort of coming to mind is like quite a lot of biomaterials are temporary, but I think from what you've both been saying, you could make quite a nice case for like there's might be a material impermanence, but there's a social permanence. And that allows the material to continue in this different way, which I think is quite an interesting idea for materiality and biodesign.
Very nicely put.
I was going to say, I will,
was incredible.
once this comes out, I will rip it off and like put it everywhere.
I want to see it on your website as a quote from you, Paul. Someone put it in a diagram.
But yeah, no, I think you said it very well. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, so take us through planetary education. Take us through it right from the define it in a sentence, and then take us through your process and your journey developing that pedagogy for the environment and current generations and for the future.
So one sentence first, and then
And also introduce what planetary education is.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
it's a new way of education.
Mm-hmm.
That's my one sentence. But I'm gonna do my spiel here. So in the current climate, both atmospherical and social, the current educational landscape is not fit. Like it's failing everyone. It's failing teachers. It's failing students. It's failing everyone else like connected with education, parents, and it doesn't have to be like that. Planetary education is a very local and situated way of learning. It's critical pedagogy that kind of, because of its locality and its situatedness, or like despite of it maybe, has also applicability to like a more more planetary view, potentially you could say it like that. So the core principles of it, so it does different things, and one of them is, for example, it looks at the current curriculum. It's like really bad. Really, I can't even say it nicely. It's really bad, and it's takes away with like fragmented subjects. It takes a web of interconnected lessons, each lesson lasting about a month, 2 months, kind of depending on how much you want to add to it, and builds from that. And each lesson has like repeating elements. It has opportunities for peer-to-peer teaching, for going into nature, all of these kind of elements. And it's it also changes the way we assess students, like going away from like grades to a lesson passport where you get written feedback on it. You have just a proper interaction with the nature that is surrounding you, really. And like, because we're a living organism, and so is like a lot of other organisms in the world. But like, if you look at our school system, that has been developed just purely based on economics. Like, we have the summers off because we used to work in the fields. Like, children used to.
Kids were needed to pick potatoes. That's it.
It's like, so that's the first thing. And then we go time-wise. It's like, because parents go to work, so children need to go to school. Like, and like the way these things are timed is also like now kind of like bad for parents as well when school starts a certain way, and so all these kind of things are happening. So why don't we learn on like living time rather than like this very like economically driven time? And then I've been reading a lot of research on that, and like most books were at least from the 80s. There's one really, really good book I was researching by C.A. Mace called The Psychology of Study, which is from the 20s, which is absolutely wild that like we still don't have these principles in there. But he likens like the idea of learning to digestion. So you have an appetite for learning, but you need to digest in between learning. So you have this way of learning and like digesting and learning and digesting and applying. So that's kind of a big part in structuring the curriculum. And then at the center of each lesson is a living organism through which you learn. So obviously you've got biology, mathematics. Funnily enough, like a lot of like mathematical concepts are really hard to grasp if you have like no interaction with it. Like especially like we saw with COVID and all of these things, linear growth and what's the other one?
Exponential?
Yes, exponential growth. Thank you. Like exponential growth, it's a really hard concept for people to grasp. But if they learn through it through like bacterial algae that has this growth cycle that goes through linear, that goes through exponential, that goes through like stagnation, you can put all of the parameters just into a different context, and it just is so much more understandable. And you can do that with like lichen as well, and like lichenometry. And the biology.
What is lichenometry?
Lichenometry is there's like a lot of people who are kind of not against it, but they like obviously see flaws in it. But basically, if a glacier, for example, melts and the rocks are exposed, the first thing that will grow on it is lichen. And you can use with like photos and measuring and like doing the calculation on how quickly that lichen grows to measure how old that glacier is, or like when this glacier got uncovered. Because a lot of times in certain regions you can't use the carbon dating method, and it's only accurate to the last 500 years or something like that. So what do you do before or after, something like that? I can't fully remember what the cutoff time is with like carbon dating, but it is used in these regions, and it's quite a low stakes kind of like thing you can do, which is really fascinating. And there's like on the PISA test, there's also an example of this in there. Funnily enough, I found by accident and was like, that's kind of cool that they have this, but they have, again, no other information about lichen or lichenometry or anything else on there. So it's like, what are you doing? Why is it just a random ass question there? But yeah, and then obviously like through a living organism, like lichen, for example, which is the one I was like fully developing, you learn about psychology, you learn about sociology. There are some good examples like queer lichen theory and We've Never Been Individuals that talk about like gender and sex and like social norms and all of these kind of elements through like lichen and like certain other organisms. Because like, the thing is also when we talk about nature and we use nature as an example, it's usually to discriminate people. Like, you don't say, oh, this is unnatural, and then like don't follow it up with something that's a bit heinous. So it's kind of like also like using this idea of being like, actually, if you look at nature, there's kind of proofs like not your hate point. Like this is actually like these things actually happen, and like we're part of nature. Like why would it be only us that do certain things? So there's a lot of that in there, and then obviously there's a lot of like, as I said, it's critical pedagogy. So there's a lot of abolitionist teachings in there, trying to like empower those voices who so far are, like have not been heard, but should be heard and should be sought out to be heard. Okay.
No, that's
Oh my
really
God, there are
cool.
so many,
There's
so many really
questions.
incredible points.
Yeah.
I think I speed run through all of them.
Okay.
I think the thing about contextualizing maths, for example, is super important because there's huge amounts of psychological research in neuroscience that shows that learning has to be embodied. You know, that's how we have evolved to learn, you know, things in context and things that involve all of our senses. And that's not how maths is taught at all.
No.
It is so abstracted and so esoteric, but it could be so fun if you learn like how could this be applied.
Also
Which,
seems like a way more flexible structure for anyone who's neurodivergent, like,
yeah,
or just has like different learning styles
for everyone, for literally
Yep,
everyone,
yep.
literally everyone. And this is for key stages 3 and 4, which
Yes.
is 11 to 16 in the UK.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the first starting point, but in reality, you can like change the
Yeah.
age levels depending on how you make it, like how easy you make it. Like for example, with like I've got in the curriculum I made, you've got these insert more knowledge elements where you can adapt it and you can learn more about stuff. Like obviously with like lichen, you can like you can make your own just like a key indicator species on air quality. So you can add in a session where the children learn how to make their own air quality sensors out of Arduino boards, and like do peer-to-peer teaching there where you've got groups, because not everyone will be interested in like Arduino boards technology and coding. So obviously you don't make it like compulsory, and like it's students will enjoy it and others won't. And if you put them in groups that work that well, that way, then you can like easily adapt. And then you also go into like this idea of like neurodivergent students and like cater to their strengths and like make it also like engaging.
There was also a really incredible aspect of this pedagogy that I found really interesting, which was like centering multiple subjects around like a local organism. And so you have this like, again, really contextualized interdisciplinary learning. So you kind of interweave your knowledge from all subjects and they reinforce each other. And it's also something that you can physically interact with and have a relationship with in your local ecosystem.
Yeah, that was kind of like one of the big things where I always found it weird that you learn like about an hour about something and then you switch completely to something else. And it's like, I just learn about like the mitochondria or something. And then, okay, now I'm doing like divisions. What's going on? Like this has no connection to each other. Like your brain has to change so quickly. And like, I don't think 5 minutes of break are enough or 10 minutes or whatever. But it's just better to see it as we need to learn as a whole. Like that's one of the big things. We need to learn as a whole. And the interesting things about these as well, like it might seem super local, like obviously with like the session I did on lichen, you learn about obviously the British Isles if you're in the UK. But if you are somewhere else, you won't have that specific type of lichen, but you might have a similar one, or you will have a similar one. And with that similar one, you might have to adapt that lesson a tiny bit, but then you can do the same lesson somewhere else that's also super local. But lichen is a bad example because they grow really slow. But like with a certain other organism, you still have the skills to cultivate either organism, or at least have the skills to be quite quick in figuring out what you need to do to cultivate another organism. So everyone kind of learns super local, but they all kind of learn the same and like have similar skill sets. Like obviously very different interests, and that will manifest quite differently, but like theoretically skill sets are the same like worldwide. And that way you can also foster a community of educators, teachers, as well as students as well. Like
the glocality is
glocality.
You can just feel it in the air. Like it's,
yeah.
want this world. Yeah, I feel like there were so many parts of your description about your project that were so interesting. Could you speak a bit more about this idea you brought up about nature and discrimination, which I think is really interesting? Because I think you're right. Like, I rarely, if ever, hear people asking if something's natural and then following it up with something that isn't really discriminatory. If you could talk more about that, because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that going on. Like, we start with like gender and like queerness and all that kind of stuff that is always like being viewed as like not natural. But if you actually look into nature, this is very much natural in like so many different organisms. And even with like there's this researcher called Amos Tversky. I think he's dead now. I think he died a few years ago. But he was one of the early researchers, together with Daniel Kahneman, on behavioral economics. And they did like great studies and wrote like a lot of stuff. And he was talking about how taxonomy is like a really, really bad thing, because it like it focuses on what's different. And like he was talking about how it's kind of like the first step into like spreading hate and division, and like we shouldn't really, like, we should focus on what kind of is similar, and then go from there. And that kind of also connects to the way we divide animals and humans, and or like it was animals, then it was I can't remember what it was. There's like this diagram in Ways of Being. I mean, for one, it's the humans and like the Neanderthals and all these, and how they like are interconnected as well, instead of like being just separate things. How like, especially in the Western world, like we always see it's like, oh, it's us, the like developed human, and then there are like these subhuman categories of like Neanderthal and all these kind of things. When in reality, like there have been mixes, like there have been half Neanderthal, half modern human, and like there was an interbreeding happening, and like there's a lot more, like we have a lot more in common with stuff than we actually would like to admit in most cases.
I think it's very telling. There's a lot of very selective uses of nature as an analogy, but it's not a true reflection of nature. It's a reflection of the biases that people have, but they're trying to make it seem as if their points of view are absolute and grounded in ecology and what's eternal, but it's just a reflection of what they wanted to say to begin with, not. That's
the interesting part. So I mentioned at the beginning, I'm reading a lot about consciousness and that kind of like field of research, and it's like I'm in this kind of like contemplation phase of like where I'm just rethinking everything, because they're like we know so very little, and all of what we know is so shaped by our consciousness. Like once we go into like, we've got all these like the natural rules, like Newton laws and all these kind of things, but then once we go into like quantum physics and like these new fields of research, where we then realize, okay, so time is not a like natural law, like time is just very much a human thing. And so actually is space, because if you travel at the speed of light, then space also becomes smaller. So like all of these things are happening. And I forgot where I was going with this. Yeah.
But I guess
I just leave it at that then.
Great.
It's interesting. Like humans have a very narrow range of perception with which they can interact with the natural world, but there is so much beyond what we are physically capable of interacting with, and then there is so much that is very difficult for us to conceive, but is there, or is the natural world is beyond our perception in so many ways.
It's like, even though there's so much proof now that there's so much we don't understand about the natural world, and therefore can't conceptualize in our current sort of storytelling and narrative of reality. We still don't want to almost admit that or allow that to come into the way that we think about nature and reality. It's like we're searching for these narratives that nature is like fixed and stable and rational in the language of science, but it really isn't in many ways. Like it's a very this world that we live in is very strange and weird and often savage, and I think that's a truer reflection of nature.
Yeah, I think also when it comes to like nature and even like going back to like the terms like discriminatory elements, a lot of it is just language, if we're completely honest about it. Like we want nature to follow specific rules and stuff because we have the word nature for it. Like we want it to follow all of these things. And if it doesn't follow that specifically, that makes us a bit uneasy. Yes, I think also like language has a big part in this and how we view nature, certain concepts in nature, certain systems in nature. Yeah.
Okay, drawing this conversation towards a close.
Been yapping too long.
Oh, we've had some good yaps.
Wonderful yappery.
Wonderful yappery. What is your dream biodesign project and why, Paul?
Oh, is it projects that have been done that I would have loved to be done?
Oh, that you want to do?
I want to do. That's a tough one. I would love to. So like, the base research for my final project was on biodesign artifacts and why they are really, really good for science communication and like impactful for science communication. And I would love to. I would love to do more. I'm not going into specifics. I'm just like generally, I would love to do more projects for interacting with the general public, like of different like skill, knowledge levels, whatever you want to call it, ages. But like creating and co-creating rather, these kind of biodesign artifacts and objects and systems that are for people to interact with and like help like cutting out researchers and people explore the world to like find out more about the natural environment, communicate those things in an accessible way and like a way people can interact with whatever the findings are, in like a very low stakes space, kind of like a very accessible space. Yeah, I think that would be my dream project.
So like biodesign object science communication.
Yeah, I say so. I think
if anyone listening to this is a science lab, please hire Paul to make some artifacts.
Please hire me. But yeah, no, I think there's like this kind of like red line through all of this with like community and like the social aspect of it, of biodesign, as well as like the also economic aspects of biodesign. Like you can be very critical of like a lot of the capitalist structures we have, or should be, definitely should be critical as well, through biodesign. And I think that will be a great thing to do and like make that also accessible to people.
I'm looking forward to seeing you bring this to fruition.
So am I. Hopefully.
We'll check back in on a year and see if you're close to it.
Pressure's on now.
Thank you very much for joining us today. And
thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure.
It has. And so for our final question, we'd like to ask, to whom
or to what
would you like to dedicate this conversation to?
I should have thought about that beforehand. I'm going to dedicate it to... Oh, that's a tough one. The thing is, I'm thinking, should I go rogue and just dedicate it to myself? I feel like that's not a cool move.
Talk us through why you'd like to dedicate it
It's
to
out there
yourself.
I don't know, in hopes of employability, showing confidence. You gotta. No, I'm dedicating this to kind of like my final project, I would say, as in like more as a vision. I'm dedicating it to a vision. I think that's a good one.
Nice.
It's a vision of like better education, because I loved learning, but I wasn't really good at school because I couldn't really identify with a lot of stuff learning. So yeah, I think to better education in any way possible.